Actually, on the way to Brest, I kind of went quite quickly, and then I went slower on the way back and stop in more of those places, stop for the crepes. So as you said, there is quite a lot of people who cook crepes on the side of the road, or there was one place where they just brought it freshly baked cake and just were slicing it, and also steam still coming out of the cake, and you could just have it. And yeah, there was one place where they opened their garage and they had the wall full of postcards, and with people who went through their place before, and they were giving you tea and coffee. But yeah, they had snacks and they had coffee, and they even put some beds on the ground so people can have a nap. The hospitality is incredible. It's just an amazing atmosphere. So it definitely helps compared to cycling through Scotland, where you hardly see anyone and you are on your own for hours and hours and hours. Well, on the PVP, it's just people everywhere.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host, Bella Malloy, and I'm very excited to introduce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Izabela Murtagh. Izabela is a self-proclaimed commuting enthusiast, and you could be forgiven for thinking perhaps nothing feels more natural to her than cycling on sodden roads over long distances through the beautiful Scottish countryside. Indeed, many of her cycling adventures involve doing exactly this. She's an accomplished Audax rider and a finisher of the most famous international Audax events, such as London, Edinburgh, London, and Paris, Brest, Paris. Last year, Izabela took to the start line of the Transalba, a 1,600-kilometre ultra-cycling event taking in a long loop around Scotland, with a good 20,000 metres of climbing to boot. Fair to say she did quite well in the Transalba. She placed first female and third place overall on GC. More recently, she's been bringing the exploits of others in the long-distance cycling community to life as the host of the Towpath Talk series, which she delivers to a live audience each month at the Towpath Cafe at Bike Tracks, Edinburgh. I'm really looking forward to chatting with Izabela today to learn more about the world of Audax, having her recount her experiences of riding some of the most famous events in the world. But equally, I'm also curious to find out more about how participating in long-distance cycling adventures and being so active in that community has itself been such an energising experience for her. Izabela, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to speak with you today, Izabela. I must put my hand up. I am someone who has been curious about the world of Audax for many years, but I have actually never done one myself. So I'm really keen to find out more about this mad world that I'm perhaps maybe curious enough to try out myself soon. But Izabela, the question which I start my show with, and I ask this of all my guests, is, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
As probably most people, I don't. But we used to have a fleet of bicycles of different sizes at my grandparents', and there were 6 of us cousins. So each of us was going through the different sizes of the bikes as we were growing up, because there was about 1-2 years difference between each of us. So you were picking up whatever bike was available at your size to ride on. But I do remember when I then graduated to big bike that my mom and my grandma used to ride, and it was just a single speed. And I do remember that when they helped me to get on the saddle, and I could barely touch the pedals, but I felt very grown up, being finally on an adult bike, still at the age probably, 6, 7. So I do remember this bike, and my mom still actually has a similar model at home. The one she's got is red, and it's kind of working still 40 years later.
That story is something that just reminds me a little bit. It takes me back in time myself. I grew up with hand-me-down bikes. Fans of the show will most likely have heard me recount that story many times before. Coming from a big family, graduating to a different size bike that was pre-owned was just what was done. But also that sense of pride when you start riding what you think is like the adult or the big person's bike, and your feet barely can do the full revolution as well. You can barely turn those pedals around in a circle. You know, sometimes you're on a tippy toe. Maybe you can't even sit on the seat. But I so know that feeling that you were talking about. If your mum's got a bike that's like that, do you think of that when you see that bike? Do you go, oh, yeah, that's a cool bike that I used to try and ride?
Yeah, I do. I still rode it until probably a couple of years ago, just go to the shops when I was visiting my parents. Probably it would need some maintenance now. I don't know if you can still get the parts for them. But yeah, I hope the bike stays around. Maybe do something with it one day.
Something else you mentioned there is, you know, when you visit, it's the bike you use to go to the shops, which I think is really apt for you, Izabela. I mentioned in my intro, you're a self-proclaimed commuting enthusiast. Commuting by bicycle is a real significant part of your Monday to Friday life, really, isn't it? It is your deal.
Yes, yeah, it is. So when we moved to Scotland 10 years ago, well, we didn't have a car. And, well, I never owned a car before that. And I knew, actually, before moving to Scotland, when we lived in Australia, one of the postdocs did a year or 2 years in Edinburgh. And he said, oh, I used to commute by bike to Heriot-Watt University. And there is a towpath there. And so before I moved here, I was like, well, I'm going to commute by bike once I move to Scotland. So the initial commute was 10 kilometers each way, but it was east to west. So it was into westerly wind most of the time and in the rain. And it was good training to get used to the Scottish weather and the wind. And then after 2 years, I got a job out in Livingston, which is about 25 kilometers west from Edinburgh. And I felt like there is no way it is possible to commute there or ride that far every day. But I tried the public transport. On the first day, I was let down by the public transport. So I was like, well, how about I try to cycle and I will do it for a week. So I did it for a week. And then I was like, well, maybe I will do it for a month and see how it feels. Like, you know, I'll be able to say, I cycled to Livingston for a month. And I did it for a month. And then I said, well, maybe I should get a better bike because I had just like a 50-pound mountain bike at the time. And so I got a better bike. So I couldn't then start taking the public transport again because like, well, I paid for the bike. So I calculated I had to cycle for 2.5 months to cover the cost of the bike in the train tickets. So I was like, so I cycled for this 2.5 months. And then I was like, well, actually, I'm really enjoying it. So I'm not going back to the public transport. And so that was almost 8 years ago.
Wow.
And in the meantime, I did buy a car because we had the beast from the east about 5 years ago. So there was just snow for quite a few weeks. So it was really difficult to get to work. So I did buy a car. And people at work said like, well, now certainly you're not going to cycle anymore. I was like, well, I'm going to show you. So as soon as the snow melted, I was back on the bike. And I do it most days, unless it's too icy, because we do get temperatures at around 0 degrees for the winter. And the roads get quite icy. We get lots of black ice. So it's a bit just not worth the risk. So there's few days a week I can drive.
I think I actually saw something in my research. I saw a post which wrapped up your last year statistics. I think if I remember correctly, I think it was 2023. I think there were like maybe, 15 days that you maybe didn't cycle commute because of the ice, which is pretty incredible when you think of an entire year, especially in Scotland.
Yeah, I think it was probably about that, like in January, maybe February. And then a couple of odd dates when I need to be home early or go for a haircut because we both have curly hair and not everyone cuts curly hair. So it's a bit difficult to get a curly.
Yes, I can totally resonate. And listeners of the show, if you don't know this about me, I have curly hair. It's what people see generally before they see me. And I was so heartwarmed when my screen popped up for this recording session. I can see Izabela here and she has curls and I loved it. But you're right. Not everyone knows how to cut our hair, right?
Yes, exactly. So when I had to go for a haircut, I had to drive to work. I was a bit annoyed with it. I was like, but I can't cycle. But, I don't make it like, I have to cycle every day because for whatever reasons, like, no, I don't have to. But cycling to work is my default option. So it's kind of driving to work that I kind of have to rearrange things, like think a different way. That's like, okay, what time do I need to leave to to get to work when I drive, or I need to dress into normal clothes to work instead of, my cycling clothes. But yeah, so the default option is cycling to work. And yeah, I really enjoy it because the route I take, it's quite scenic because Edinburgh is it's not a big city. You are out of the city quite quickly, and there's just nice back roads and fields, which in spring they are covered in rapeseed and barley, and you see pheasants, you see deer, and also other people. So one of the things I really like about my commuting is and having fixed working hours, because I have to be in Livingston by 8:30, is like seeing the same people. So sometimes they are the same cyclists that do similar route but in the opposite way, or the person who goes to get the paper at the same time every day, or dog walkers, or a lollipop lady at the school every morning, or like person who waits for a lift for a bus. Those people have fixed times, just as I do in the morning. And, over the time, you get to see them and you greet them. So, there is a range of people you see along the way, which I really, really like.
I love that element, and it reminds me when I was cycle commuting when I was living in Australia, that was exactly one of my favourite parts. It was funny, Izabela, I changed jobs and I was really lucky in that my workplace was like 2 kilometres away from where I lived, so perfect walking distance, right? But as someone who loves bikes, I still wanted to cycle commute, but 2 kilometres isn't far enough, so I used to make my commute longer, and I'd go the long way to work, which would be like, I don't know, maybe 27 kilometres sometimes. But I remember part of the highlights of that cycle commute were seeing the same faces of people either riding the other way, commuting to work, just riding their bike, or, there was a couple that I used to see, 2 older women friends that would go for a walk together in a certain park. And it used to be a mental thing for me. I used to know if I was doing well time-wise by where I would see them on the cycle commute. Is this something you do? Like, do you know, like, oh, if I pass this person and I'm here, I'm going fast today? Or
Yeah, exactly. Because, you kind of know roughly the range where you see the same people. But some days I know I left late and I see them still in the same place. Like, they are late as well.
I wonder, have you ever made friends with anyone that you've passed on the way? Like, you must obviously give them a nod or say hello maybe, but have you ever actually stopped and found out who these people are?
So I started this a couple of years ago because there were some people also passing my workplace, and I used to tell my colleagues oh, they are my friends. I have no idea what their name is. So next time I saw them, it's I waved them down. It's what is your name? Because I tell people you are my friend, but actually I don't know your name. So then, we had a wee chat. But also last Christmas, so just before Christmas, I thought, I really like, for winter, there are not that many people that you see regularly. And I thought oh, how about if I will have little gifts for my commuting people with a chocolate.
You're talking straight to my heart. I wish I was on your commute.
So I went to the shops. I got Lindt chocolates. So, like the little Linder balls. So not just any chocolates.
These are worth stopping for.
And I put them in little bags, and I put little messages that I love seeing them on my commute, and I wish them Merry Christmas. And so I had a little bag with them, and I was hoping, I will see those people along the way. So I had the little bag with me and was cycling along. If I saw someone coming, I would just wave them down. I was here's something for you. With quite a few people, it was the first time we spoke to each other because, otherwise it was just a greeting. I was hello. But, you see those people for, 3-4 years. And so you see each other quite regularly. But I was hello, I'm such and such. It's here's something. And actually one guy says oh, I had a Christmas card for you as well, but I forgot to bring it. So, actually it's not just me. There was someone who had a similar idea. So I gave away, I think about 10 of them. Because, through winter, there are not so many people, and some people I didn't manage to catch before Christmas. So then I was still in January. I was still carrying the chocolates to give them for the past Christmas. But
That is so cool that there's this little sort of underground commuting community, if that makes sense. And you sort of know each other, and you know that you're part of a special, unique group in a way as well. I was going to say, Izabela, you can tell you're commuting in Scotland when you can just carry little Lindt ball chocolates and on your commute and they're not going to melt.
Oh, yeah, no. No chance.
Something that occurred to me, actually, Izabela, knowing that you have been commuting such long distances for, 8 years now. And I don't want to overplay the fact that you're commuting in Scotland, but I think it's fair to say you definitely deal with some grim type of weather conditions. I followed your Instagram for a while now and I've seen the photos. It's always damp, it's always wet. Even if it's not raining, it's wet on the road. But I wonder how much that has actually held you in good stead for a lot of the long distance stuff that you do, like mentally, because I think having the conviction to continue to commute when, let's face it, probably more than 9 people out of 10 would often say, no, let's take the car today. Like that obviously must give you some sort of a mental edge. Do you agree with that idea?
Definitely, because, I think one of the worst weather I had was definitely on some of the commutes, and also before I got, better kit that, would keep me dry and warm, well, mostly warm. So whenever I do an Audax, usually the weather is not that bad because I've had worse. Often on some Audaxes, you will have people who said, oh, the wind was brutal. It's like, it's Scotland. It's nothing compared to, the winter winds, and storms that we get where you really struggle to stay up on a bike. So usually the Audax's weather is better because they are usually sometime between March and November, because running Audax events through winter in Scotland is quite tricky because a lot of the times they will have to be cancelled because of the ice. So, people, not that many events are held through winter. When it's March to November, it's usually generally a bit warmer. So, even if you get wet, maybe you are not that cold.
What would be one of your most valuable pieces of commuting kit then? And I'm not talking mudguards on your bike. Everybody's got a piece of clothing. Like, what do you find that you can just rely on and depend on, and you were so happy that you found it's made commuting such a much more pleasant experience when you're dealing with this type of weather?
Well, so I'm still improving my wardrobe, to be honest, because I started commuting just in my bushwalking clothes. So because, it's just kind of stuff I brought from Australia. It's like, oh, I can cycle in those things. And, then I was cold and wet. And I think I only bought them last year. They are waterproof gloves and they make such a big difference. So my hands are not frozen right away when it's raining. And also anything that has windproof properties. So like gilets or jackets that they stop the wind, because I didn't have them until probably about 3 years ago. And no matter how many layers I put on, I was still cold. But now you put one layer and it stops the wind, and actually it's so much more pleasant. Yeah, the rain jackets, and only recently I started putting over trousers as well. Only got them last year. They're not nothing fancy, but they mean that the bottoms that I have, they are not soaked through, so they're also easier to dry. But generally buying things that are Scottish weather suited. And I actually buy quite a few things from a company called Galibier. They're based in Northern Ireland, but they make kit that is very, very suitable for Scotland, and they are reasonably priced. Because as you know, Bella, cycling clothes are expensive. And if you want to buy a whole range of them, they're really, really expensive. So, but if you find something that is good quality, and you can start collecting your things, and you realize that actually you can feel quite comfortable when you're on a bike. It makes such a difference.
Oh, 100% agree. It's interesting how you say it has prepared you so well when it comes to Audax riding, because you find the weather is nowhere near as bad for that during an Audax. I guess before we get into the details of, what an Audax is, I just want to quickly ask you, what's probably the worst weather which event gave you the worst weather that you had to deal with from an Audax perspective?
So actually it will be an Audax event. It's called the Snow Roads, and it wasn't wet. It was in June, but the wind was really, really bad. And it's a 300-kilometer route through the Cairngorms National Park, and it takes quite a lot of high passes, Lecht and Glenshee, and all sorts of different hills there where there are ski resorts. But the wind was really, really strong. We really, I struggled to get down some of the hills because the crosswinds were just so strong. So I had to walk down the hills. So it wasn't wet. It was just really, really strong wind. There was just a struggle over those 300 kilometers. and everyone was quite late to finish. And we finished at a local hall. We got food and braidies and soup. And you could just see everyone being completely zoned out and sitting there. It's like, what just happened? What was this ride?
Winds like that are so scary. I've experienced really bad strong winds and crosswinds particularly that have, blown you off a road and then also made me walk a bike down a hill. I never thought that I would have to do that because of wind before. And I actually put my hand up and saying, having done that during an event, I've never actually been 100% the same since that wind experience. I'm more concerned about really strong windy weather than I am about wet weather because of that. Are you a little bit similar now?
Yeah, because rain is just like, rain is not dangerous, right? But when you have windy and gusty weather, then, this is quite dangerous. And I know one person just got blown into a ditch. Nothing really happened. But, these are actual dangers, while rain is just like, it's not usually dangerous, right?
It's just more unpleasant, really. Let's get into the Audax world. There will be listeners to the show that will know all about Audaxes. I'm sure I've got many listeners there. Hello to you all who have participated in Audax events, but there will also be people who are like, Audax, what are these people talking about? So who best to describe this to someone than yourself, Izabela? If you were to introduce people to the concept of an Audax, what would you tell them it is and what is it all about?
Yeah, so actually that's a very good question because, a few years ago, I was the same. It's like, what is an Audax? And some of my colleagues actually completed a couple of events. So they actually explained what an Audax is. So Audax, it's a word that comes from Latin and it means audacious, bold. And basically it's a long distance bike ride when you have a set of controls that you have to go through. So there will be towns or maybe some crossroads and you have certain time window when you have to go through them. And generally the route is like you can pick whatever route you want, but the organizers will provide you with usually with a GPS track, which is usually the best route to follow and the most scenic one. And so you can just use this GPS track and follow the route till you get to those so-called controls along the way. And either it's an info control that maybe you'll be asking you, what's the distance to such and such town or the signpost there? Or it will be just a village or a town and there will be a free control. So you just need to go to the shop and get a proof of passage, which is usually get the receipt if you buy something in a shop. Or you go to an ATM, you can get a bank statement. It will have the date and time where you pass this control. So Audax is not a race. So actually there is the minimum time. So if you want to go very, very fast, you would still have to wait at the controls potentially. If you go faster than the maximum speed required, they don't want people to go very, very fast and make it a race. So you can go fast, but then to get the ride validated, you have to wait for your window to open at those controls as well. And usually the distances for those rides are between 200 kilometers. Then you've got 300 kilometers, 400, 600, 1,000, 1,200 kilometers, and 600 kilometers. That are the kind of standard. But the most popular ones are 200 kilometers. And for each distance, at least in the UK, you get points. So if it's a 200 kilometers, you get 2 points. 300 kilometers, you get 3 points. And you kind of collect those points along the way. And at the end of the season, there are awards also for people with the highest number of points, if this is something you are interested in, collecting points.
You would have collected a lot of points.
Actually, I don't, because I do quite a lot of rides, but I don't always do them for points. So if you do a calendar event, which is organized by an organizer, then yeah, you get the points. But there is also the category DIY. So do it yourself. If you can't do like a weekend event, a calendar event organized, or you just don't want to, you can do your own ride and you can submit it. You have to follow certain rules about the route and you can then submit your plan, go and do the route, then send the details for validation and you can get the points for it. But I don't usually bother. So I still do the rides. I do them in Audax style and I just don't really bother doing them for points.
I'm curious, Izabela, when you first learnt about Audax, what was then the first Audax that you decided to have a go at and what distance was that?
So my first long ride was 300 26 kilometers, which is 200 miles, but it was not an Audax. It was inspired by something a couple of guys from Edinburgh Bike Forum did the year before. So they cycled to Carlisle, which is down in England, and it's 100 miles away from Edinburgh. And then they joined Ride to the Sun, which is a yearly event.
I've heard of this. Keep going. Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Just for our listeners, tell them about Ride to the Sun.
Yes, Ride to the Sun is an event organized by Fraser and Gary, which are two guys who live in Edinburgh. And about 10 years ago, they thought they wanted to do some training for the Ironman, but they struggled with family time. And they're like, how about if we ride through the night around the summer solstice? So they took a train to Carlisle, and I think they told a few people, it's like, we're going to do this. Anyone is welcome to join. And they started in the afternoon on Saturday and rode to Crammond Beach in Edinburgh for the sunrise. And so that's a 160-kilometer distance. And yeah, quite a few people turned up. And they decided to do it every year since. And now there's hundreds of people coming and doing this. And also scouts help to organize transportation there. So to help people to get to the start line, because there are not many bike spaces on the trains available to do it. So there's hundreds of people doing it on this route. But people also now make it part of their bigger adventures. So you don't have to organize the transport. You can cycle down from Edinburgh and cycle back with the Ride to the Sun, or make it even a bigger, like a 400k route. So the nice part of it is there will be hundreds of people along this route, and there will be a piper at top of the Beef Tap, which is one of the major climbs on this route. So there's a piper standing there through the night playing tunes. And then further on, there is also a rave. So through one of the valleys, there's a little village, which is most of the time through the night, there is nothing happening. But suddenly there is this rave, music and lights. So you stop for this, and there is usually bananas being given away and water. And then you continue for the sunrise to Crammond. I had this plan that I thought I will do this. But the Ride to the Sun usually runs on the nearest Saturday to the solstice, which is summer solstice, which is 22nd of June, I think. So they pick one of the weekends around it. But at the time, I used to work on Sundays, and I didn't get to take a day off on Sunday. So I thought, well, I'm not going to cycle 200 miles for the first time in my life and, go to work on Sunday morning. So yeah, I couldn't do the Ride to the Sun with everyone because I couldn't get the day off on a Sunday. So I decided to go on my own on a Friday. And I've never cycled more than 100 kilometers before that. So I decided I would go during the day instead of, cycling through the night. So I set off just after the sunrise, which is at about 4 a.m. in Scotland. At the time, in June, I got to Carlisle, to the park. There was nobody there because it was the day. I was 24 hours ahead of everyone. And then started cycling back home to Edinburgh. And I got home at around shortly before the sunset. So I had this lovely day just cycling on my own. I've never cycled that far from Edinburgh or from anywhere. I made it back.
Can I just say, Izabela, and for my listeners, my mouth's sort of half open hearing this story, because hang on, did you just say you'd never ridden more than 100 kilometres and yet you just turned up and decided on your own without the benefit of other people in an event to feel that solidarity of other riding companions? You turned up to an event that's over 300 kilometres?
Yeah. Well,
whoa.
It's not even an event. It was just I'm going to cycle from home, cycle there, and then cycle back.
You didn't even get to be at the little village with the rave getting bananas. Wow. And you got through it. Did you ever doubt you could get through it?
Yes. Well, so I knew it was basically just doing my commute 10 times. And I was like, well, I can do it twice in a day. So, then it's only 8 more times.
So logical, of course. It's just 8 more times. Was that the mental maths you were playing to get you through? Each time you were going, well, now I've only got 7 commutes left. Oh, there's another commute done. Now I've only got 6. Were you doing that type of a mental strategy to get you through?
So towards the end, once I got, I think, to 8 times when I was coming back to Edinburgh, because I didn't really have track map to follow. So, I had the Google Maps and I had the route. So whenever there was a turn, I had to stop and check where I'm supposed to go now. Luckily, the route is not so difficult. So I managed, and I was just tracking the route on Strava, but I didn't look at the screen all the time. And I saw signs to Edinburgh, which were in miles. So then I was converting miles to kilometers, and it's okay, so that's still just 2 more commutes. Okay, I can do 2 more commutes. Sure. Yeah. And then, so I was just using the signs to know how far I was from home. And it's like, yeah, that's only 1 more commute. Or I can do 1 more commute home. I will be home.
I think that speaks to 2 things. One, it's such a cliche when people say with long distance events, it's the mental battle, not a physical battle. Someone told me at the start of my French Ultra, it was a French bike mechanic, and he told me a saying in French, and it was commencer avec les jambes, finir avec la tête, which I know I probably butchered the French on this, but translated, it means you will start with the legs, but you will finish with the head, in the idea that, you start and your legs are what get you going, but it's going to be your head that gets you to the finish line. I sort of feel like what you were translating there really reflects that. But on the flip side, Izabela, what I also think is you have just this inner endurance built into you now because you regularly are cycling over 50 kilometres a day, 5 days a week. There is an endurance built up from just those steady daily commutes too. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. Like, there is the base commute, and then just Audax it's like doing the same, but just for longer, because, I don't go fast on my commutes. And on those long distance events, you don't really go fast either. You just do it for longer. And, it's a pace that can sustain for a very, very long time. So, yeah, definitely having the base from commuting, it helps. I don't do any other training. I heard there are zones that people use. Apparently there's zone 2. I think I'm in zone 2 when I cycle to work from, what I've heard. And I know when people do training, they do quite a lot of the zone 2 training to have the endurance. So I think I'm doing it, but it's not intentional. It just happens.
Oh, I just love the purity of this. It's speaking to my soul, because I have to say I have gone down the other path before, and I've gone all down the whole fitness thing, heart rate monitor wearing, understanding power zones, doing interval sessions. And it's only really in the last couple of years where I'm winding all of that back, unlearning it all, and just going back to the beauty of riding my bike and not caring. I read a quote from you actually, or I heard a quote from you, Izabela, recently, which was, with Audax, you don't have to go fast, but you just have to go smart. And that sort of seems to be a little bit playing to that as well. It's not about speed. It's not going to get you there. It's about a different type of strategy. And I think the mental games must be huge.
Yes.
You try Ride to the Sun. It's not an Audax. What is your first Audax then? And how do you all of a sudden find yourself doing the biggest Audaxes there are? Like London, Edinburgh, London's what, 1,500 kilometres? That's huge. That's got to be one of the biggest actually, doesn't it?
Yes. So I did my ride. I was like, well, that's me done. It's like, I know I can do it. Partially the reason that I thought I could do it was because one of the persons who did it the year before, where I got this idea from, he was doing the same commute, but in the opposite direction, a guy called Ian. And I was like, well, if he's doing the same commute as I do, and he did this, surely I can do it. I was like, yeah, you can. So yeah, like having someone, seeing this, like, well, they do the same what I do. If they don't do something bigger, I can do it as well. And yeah, definitely you can. It's not difficult. It's just, it just takes time. That's what it is.
It takes time. Break it down into sizable chunks. How many commutes of time?
Exactly. And yeah, I had no interest to do it ever again. But one of the local Audaxes reached out to me on Facebook, like, you did this in a such and such time. You can do Audaxes. I was like, I have no interest in doing this ever again. But then he got in touch again and I was like, fine, I will sign up for an Audax. And there was one in September. So it was like 3 months after I did my ride. And it was the year of Brest, Paris. So there weren't many people at the start line. It was a 300 event starting in Galashiels, which is in the Scottish borders. It's about 50, 60 kilometers south of Edinburgh. And there's a local organizer there, Lucy, and she puts out quite a lot of events through the Scottish borders. I went there, were 11 people at the start line. So one of the smallest events. We set off through the Scottish borders valleys, and I was just on my own to the first control, but then another person who was also the first doing this for the first time also arrived, and then we set off together and we did the whole ride then together, and trying to discuss things, how this all works, and this long distance cycling. I met this friend Paul. He gave me company, so when we were coming back through the valleys again through the night, it was nice to have someone to talk to. I was like, oh, okay, so that's another 300 events. So it's like a week worth of commute just crammed into one day. Yeah. If you look at this this way, it's actually not that far. That was my first calendar event. Then there was another 200 event a month later that I also went, because then it kind of became also a social thing. Paul said, he's like, oh, I'm coming to this event. Are you coming? It's like, okay, I will come along as well. It becomes kind of a social thing that other people are doing it, that you know. So it's like, I will come along as well. So that was in 2019. So it was just before the COVID started. So it was one of the last calendar events that were happening before there was a big break.
The community with Audax is what I've heard makes it such a great thing as well. There is that sort of camaraderie. I must admit, I do put my hand up unashamedly as saying sometimes when I hear about Audax, I do feel like, do you nearly need to have a prerequisite of being like a middle-aged older guy with a beard? You know, sorry people, but that is sort of what I think about. But then I've sort of dug into it a little bit more and realised it's much more than that for sure. But is it much more than that? Am I right to think that there is a difference, or is there a stereotype rightly?
So there is part of truth in this. The beards are not so common anymore, right? So the beards are not. But the steel bikes, titanium bikes, and Paradise bags with, all sorts of things that you may need, spares and extra clothing, and dynamo wheels. That's what you will see quite a lot on those events. But in terms of person, like, yes, there's mostly men in there. And I think endurance comes with an age in a way as well. So, maybe young people want to just go fast and, they will do shorter distances but fast. But in Audax, you will get people coming from racing, and they, because they may realize like, well, I will try something different. I can't really compete in races so much anymore, but, it will just go slower for a longer time. So you get people coming from different backgrounds. So like from racing or maybe touring, because it's quite similar to touring. It's just going these extra miles in a day and lighter, but so you cover more ground in a shorter time than touring. And then, there's people like myself just coming from commuting or just, riding around. So it's a really nice, interesting mixture of people from different cycling backgrounds. So on the PBP, the average age was, I think, 52. And that's probably about right on most of those events. But it's also a great opportunity actually to have long conversations with people of different ages, because you don't really get this chance in normal life, I suppose. Like, you may not be friends with people who, some of them could be your parents' age, to go and have long conversations like this. But here you are on a bike for many, many hours. People will tell you their life stories. And especially when you go through the night, you want to have some company, someone to talk to. So you will hear all sorts of stuff.
And I think there's also a community at the checkpoints too, isn't there? And like, I guess when we're talking longer events like London, Edinburgh, London, and then Paris, Brest, Paris, we're talking about events that are going over multiple days. And the checkpoints, often they're like in like community town halls or something like that. And there's food there. There's, I think for the really big events, there's sort of like sleep systems. Like you can pay to sleep or have someone wake you up in 2 hours or whatever. And I think I've watched that on documentaries. So I always picture, Izabela, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you might need to pack earplugs or something for that, don't you? Because I guess it's going to be like a hall filled with like snoring and all sorts of sounds, right?
Yes. So longer events that are also probably they're 600 kilometers and over. So if you go over 600, you go over 2 days. 400 events, you just generally don't sleep because it's just like a long day ride. Your time limit is 27 hours for 400 kilometers, but most people will finish it under 24 hours. So you don't really need to sleep. But 600, you go over 2 days. And sometimes the organizers will provide backdrops, so you can bring your sleeping mat and sleeping bag, and they will have an overnight stop or overnight control. So there will be food there, and there will be floor where you can snooze for a couple of hours. But yes, earplugs. So recently, I upgraded my earplugs last year. I went to some of the Audaxers and asked them what are the earplugs I should get so I can sleep. And they do have ratings. They've tried several different types. And it's like, these are the ones you want.
We need to know the answer to this. This is important. What are the earplugs we should be getting?
I would have to check the name. I can post it, but they've been recommended by the Four Corners Cycling Club, which is kind of a group of Audax cyclists in the UK who do really big distances. And they say, these are the ones we want. This one's the one you should get.
Send me the name and I'll post it up in the show notes, because I think there's going to be a few people that are pretty curious about this. Can I ask a quick question? I've been told by people that one of the hardest distances to do, because for the bigger events, you actually need to qualify,
yes.
I think, to be able to do that. And the way you do that is by showing that you have done a series of those events building up the distance. But I've heard people say to me that the hardest distance to tick off in an Audax is actually the 400K, because it is a distance where you don't need to sleep, but you get tired enough where you probably really want to. Whereas with the 600K, it's longer, but you will sleep. What's your experience with that? Do you agree with that sentiment?
Yes and no. So if I do a 400 distance on my own from home, I would start at 4 a.m. So, I will come home on Friday night, get my bike ready, go to bed, and I will wake up, let's say 3 a.m. and I will set up at 4. So I still have like a full night's sleep. And then I will come home at around 2, 3 a.m. between Saturday to Sunday. And I go to bed and I still get a full-time sleep. So basically doing this 4 a.m. to, let's say, 2 a.m., it's a long day, but a lot of calendar events, they start in the afternoon. So like, let's say 3 p.m., you will start it on 3 p.m. and then you will finish about 24 hours later. So you go through the whole night. So you start during the day, you go through the whole night, and then you go through the morning. So those are quite hard. Some of them even start like at 10 p.m. So you start through the night. So I think those are really, really hard because it's a long, so it's 24 hours plus all the time you've been awake before it.
So you don't necessarily find the 400 super bad if you start it in the morning, like early in the night. It's dark. If you have a 4 a.m. start and you're banking on finishing around 2 at night, so you're not riding through a full night.
Yeah, so it's kind of night at the start and night at the end. I'm not losing the full night's sleep somewhere. I still have sleep at the start and at the end.
With London, Edinburgh, London, is it similar to Paris, Brest, Paris in that you need to do qualifiers?
No, London, Edinburgh, London, you just sign up. If you get a place, then off you go and you do it.
Is it a ballot?
It is a ballot.
Okay.
If you're a member of the Audax UK and you have been member for like the past 4 years, you get a guaranteed entry. But if you're not, and I wasn't, you enter a ballot and you hope to get a place. And the previous one in 2022, everyone got in because it was after the COVID and it was after the Brexit. So actually not so many people were applying. So I think everyone who wanted, they got a spot.
And it's on again this year, isn't it? Because it's every 2 years.
So both PBP and London and Edinburgh, London are every 4 years, but they are kind of like 2 years in between them.
Of course. Okay.
But the 2021 LEL got postponed to 2022. Therefore, it was 1 year after another, where it was LEL and then PBP. But the next LEL is 2025. So it'll be like just only 3 years since the last one.
Okay, I understand. So it's a bit out of whack there as well.
So the PBP has more rules. Like, you have, as you said, you have to qualify. You have to do 200, 300, 400 and 600K rides in the year, like in the season before the PBP to qualify for it. So which kind of helps because it means people actually have to ride those distances before. Why for the LEL, you can just I've never done anything like this. I will go and ride from London to Edinburgh and then back to London.
Now, if I'm correct, you did what's called a permanent before London, Edinburgh, London, didn't you?
Yes. So in the year when London, Edinburgh, London got cancelled, because the year before I did the 400 ride just on my own. It was like during the COVID, but you could go for day rides and 400K ride is a day ride, right? So it's like, I can do this. I'm not breaking any rules. And then a month later, I thought, I will try 600 because that's part with the Audax. You will try one distance and it's like, can I ride longer? And it's like, I can ride the longer. It's like, how about if I ride the next one up, which is, 600. So, and the 600, if you do it as a DIY or like, from home, you can do 2 loops from home, do 1 loop, come back, sleep for a little bit and do another loop the next day. And so, that's your 600. So I thought like, so the next year I would like to do something bigger. But, the Edinburgh, London got cancelled. So I reached out to one of my Audax friends and was like, are you thinking about doing something big? And he said, oh, actually, yes. So there's this permanent event called 8 Some Real. It's an event around Scotland. So it's permanent event. So it means that you're provided with a list of controls, places you have to visit, but you plan it all yourself and you select when you start, and then your clock starts and you have to finish it before certain number of hours that you are allocated for this. So the event, actually, it's not quite 1,600 kilometers. It's like, I think, 1,570. But because we're so close to 1,600, we decided, shall we just do the rest? I think we had like 20 kilometers to do it, 1,000 miles or 1,600 kilometers. So we finished this in Inverness, and we thought like, well, yeah, we'll do that. Go for like extra 25K ride and we'll get to 1,600. So we did that. So I did it with a friend called Robbie Fargo. So he was much more experienced in terms of those bigger events because he's done the LEL and the PBP before. But we only started planning this a month before. So, I don't plan far ahead. We kind of thought like, oh, let's do it. Probably like 2 weeks before we started booking accommodation because we deciding where we are going to start, which we are going to do it, and, trying to plot the route and how to divide it. So we split it into about 300 kilometers days, starting about 6 a.m. every morning. And because it's Scotland, it was in August, we decided to stay in accommodation, B&Bs and hotels. So because you don't have to carry as much stuff with you. And plus, it will be probably cold and quite wet. So we were trying to find where we can find accommodation about 300 kilometers from the last accommodation, find where you can do food stops, where you can get food along the way, because south and north of Scotland, actually, there is not that much. And things close quite early. You have to think ahead. It's like, oh, I'm going to get my dinner here. I need to buy enough stuff to get me through the night. And maybe stuff for breakfast as well, because I will be leaving at 6 a.m. So before anything opens.
It's not like a LEL or Paris Brest Paris where, at the control points there's going to be a local hall that's got food available for you. You have to be it's almost like you've taken on an ultra. It is almost an unofficial ultra in a way. I mean, it is an ultra. It's ultra distance for sure, and it's self-supported. So,
and yeah, there is only you doing it. Really, there is nobody else. Like there is nobody to cheer for you. It was good to have do it with someone who's done this sort of thing before, and we planned it. So I planned my trips using spreadsheets. So I plug in the numbers, and so it helps me to calculate what time I will be where, and to kind of try to break it down into smaller bits. Try to have like a shop or something every, let's say, 60, 70, 80 kilometers to make sure there is food I can, resupply. You just plug in the average speed and it's like, okay, I'm going to be there. Is there anything available? If not, then you find something else. Then I print it out and put sticky tape all over it. You can just look at it and you know how far you are from the next food stop. Whether, I should eat some snacks now or, I should wait because in 15 minutes, there will be a shop. I will get some food there. But you're having kind of all planned out this way instead of just ride and figure it out along the way. Like for me, the only way I can do those things is kind of plan it and know, I'm going a little bit too slow. So I will stop for a shorter time to not be behind my schedule.
That gives you the confidence in going into it, sort of knowing enough details to say, I've got the information I need to help me to be successful in getting to the end there. I guess there's also that massive boost of confidence. When you do get to the end, you sort of see what you're able to do. I'm interested to find out, Izabela, did you get to the end of that permanent going, I'm definitely going to do London, Edinburgh, London, or did you get to the end of that permanent going, never again? Hello everyone, I just wanted to take a quick moment to say a big heartfelt thank you to all of you listeners who have given me a small financial donation and supported me on Buy Me a Coffee. All of those donations do make a difference. They help to support the running costs of this podcast so that I can keep producing episodes for you each week. And I really appreciate all of you who've clicked on the Buy Me a Coffee link and sent me through a small donation. If you are listening and would like to support the show, you can do so quite easily. I've provided a link to Buy Me a Coffee. You will find it in the show notes. If you click on that link, and you can choose to buy me a coffee, which again is just a small donation which helps towards the running costs of the show. Thank you all so much. Okay, now let's go back to the show.
Oh, well, you get to the end, it's like, I'm tired now. Yeah, so it takes a bit of time trying to. Yeah, I don't think I've ever been like proud at the end of it, because it's like, I know it's hard. But then you look back, it's like, yeah, it's a long distance, but it's like, so many people do it. You're not anything special. On the LEL or PBP, you have hundreds and thousands of people completing the same thing. Some will have more fun than the others, but it's not that difficult. It's just, as long as you can keep pedaling on your bike, I think everyone can do it.
Can I ask then, have there been moments where you've nearly not done it, where you've been in the middle of it and gone, no, I can't do this one? Like, have you ever had to not finish an Audax? When it's gotten gritty, have you had the mental self-talk to say, keep going?
So I've never had that I nearly not finished or scratched. But yeah, on those big, long events, I did notice like day 4 or 5, it starts getting really hard. Yeah, it's just like the legs are tired, not getting much sleep. I can really feel it. Well, being a woman, I always get period on all those rides as well. So you get, all those things to deal with it.
Apparently that's a good thing. Apparently that's when we are at our strongest. Well, for a few days.
I know, but there's extra stuff you have to deal with, finding the toilets, it's like, I need to, my pee stop is a little bit longer because I have to do other things. I try to be quite organized with it, have enough ibuprofen, so, it's not an issue. But, there is all those extra stuff that if this wasn't happening would be just easier. On the PBP was my first event where I didn't have to deal with it. I was like, oh, that's so much easier. I don't have to worry about any of that.
Yeah, if I could just schedule that to be that way all the time, that would be amazing. You sound like to me that doesn't, you commute in all weather in Scotland all year, and you're very matter of fact about, everyone can do this. It's no big deal, no special. So, but everyone has those moments when you're overtired where you just almost can't think for yourself. Do you almost feel like that is what's getting you through? You're too tired to give up? So
I did have, like, on the LEL, I remember when on the way back, when we were coming back down south, I left Brampton early in the morning. It was a lovely day, and I was, that feels great. But I went through Alston, which is like a town. I got some food from the shop, and I started cycling up again. And I suddenly felt really, really tired. And I felt like I just need to sit on the side of the road for a little bit. And I feel sorry for myself. But as soon as I got off my bike, actually, I saw a friend of mine who started catching up with me. And I was like, well, that's me sitting on the ground done. I was like, I need to carry on with him now. So definitely having people does help. Yeah. Nothing good will come just, sitting on the side of the road and feeling sorry for yourself. Just, get on the bike and keep pedaling. And so it definitely helped to have this boost. It's like, let's go. We're doing it.
Did you find that Brest, Paris, I don't want to use the word easy because you've still got to do it and you're still really tired, but did you find there was an element where keeping on going was made easier because of all the people there, and not just the people that are actually riding it, but also the people who live in the village houses that you're riding through actually coming out and supporting you and cheering you on? Because it is a huge, big deal in that part of France when Paris-Brest Paris is on. There's even a boulangerie treat called Paris-Brest, which is named after the race. That's how big this event is, right?
Yes. Yes, Paris-Brest Paris in those terms were so much easier because, there was people everywhere. And I met a person who I knew kind of through Instagram and Strava, John, and we ended up riding quite a lot of it together. But you get people cheering on the side of the road, people having picnics on the side of the road, and saying bon courage. Yeah, that's how they say bonne route, allez allez, and kids lining up through villages, and you high five them as you come through. Yeah, so I actually put a little bell on my bike so I could, ring the bell when we were going for those people and, get very enthusiastic, cheer, appreciate in a way, greet them as well. And actually, I think also, first you get more cheering if you're a woman, because there's only about 7% women that took part in the PvP. So which is, a very, very small number. And I don't have the other perspective. But when his friend John would split up for a section, and so he went on his own, and he says like, I wasn't getting any cheering like when I was on my own. It's like, I think it's all because of I'm with you. So then he stuck with me. I was like, I'm just gonna ride with you because then I get all the cheering as well.
That's a hot tip, everyone. Ride with a woman. I've heard that there's like some famous roadside special areas. I've seen it in a documentary. There's like a family who there's probably a few of these that are in front of their house cooking crepes for the riders. There's people who do this every Paris, Brest, Paris, and they've got like a little mural of like postcards from participants. They get them to like send them a postcard of where they're from and stuff like that. Did you see stuff like this during that event too then?
Yes, definitely. Actually, on the way to Brest, I kind of went quite quickly, and then I went slower on the way back and stop in more of those places, stop for the crepes. So as you said, there is quite a lot of people who cook crepes on the side of the road, or there was one place where they just brought it freshly baked cake and just were slicing it, and also steam still coming out of the cake. And you could have it. And yeah, there was one place where they opened their garage and they had the wall full of postcards, and with people who went through their place before, and they were giving you tea and coffee. Actually, I'm not sure about tea because it's France. They don't really do much tea, don't they? But yeah, they had snacks and they had coffee, and they even like put some beds on the ground so people can have a nap. Yeah, so the hospitality is incredible, and there's people playing music and people dancing. So when we got to Brittany, like there were, I remember these two ladies like dancing this Breton dance. It's just an amazing atmosphere. So it definitely helps compared, to cycling through Scotland where you hardly see anyone and you are on your own for hours and hours and hours. Well, on the PvP, it's just like people everywhere. And I think, yeah, if you need anything, they will try to help you. A lot of those places, people don't have much themselves, but, they will give you their food, they will give you bed, whatever else you need.
Wow. I was just thinking, Izabela, could you imagine if, some of your grim Scottish commutes, if there was someone in a house there that was there to cheer you on and give you a bon courage, or to like hand you over like a haggis and cheese toastie or something, or the equivalent of the hot baked cake with steam coming out of it. That would be such a lift, wouldn't it? Is Paris, Brest, Paris something you want to do again, having experienced that?
Yes and no. So before, I wasn't really convinced to go to the Paris, Brest, Paris. I heard stories about it from people that it's amazing, but I was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, oh, it's all the way in France. It's so far away. I didn't actually have plans sorted out for it, how to get there, until like a month before, when one of the local riders was going. They decided to take a van and they had extra space in the car and offered me a lift. I was like, okay, yes, then all the logistics is sorted. So sure, I'll come along, because I did all the registration. I had everything sorted, but not actually the logistics, how I'm going to get there. Yeah, it exceeded my expectations so much. Like, until actually, I think you go and experience it, like no stories will give you the same experience. And I know how good it was. And I worry that maybe if I go next time, it would be different, right? I worry that maybe it won't be the same, won't be quite as good anymore. So in a way, I would like to do it again, but I worry maybe it won't be as good.
Yeah, I've had this conundrum with other things before with rides where it was such a great experience, or I've got such amazing memories. I don't want to do the same thing again. I don't want what I do not to live up to those lofty expectations. But you're right, it would be different, and it would be a different atmosphere. Like, it would be different weather potentially, or you rode with your friend John. You might be riding with somebody else, or there's different sort of expectations. But it's a massive conundrum. I can understand it. I must admit, I am very, very intrigued with Audax and getting into it enough to then register for Paris Brest Paris is something I am keen on. Maybe we'll both be lining up for the 2027 event. Is it in 2027?
Yes.
Wow. I'm not sure I can pinky swear on it just yet. But in fact, I must put it out there. Previous guests of the show and good friends of mine, Tom and Stevie, who live in Frankfurt, hello. We've sort of talked about doing it as a group before with my husband, Steve, as well. And so who knows, maybe all 5 of us will be there on the start line.
Actually, kind of an advice. I think it's actually Audaxes are better done with people who are you not very good friends with.
Oh, we need to go down this rabbit, Warren.
So, when you're tired and when you are hungry, I get quite cranky. So I know, like, when I get cranky, I need food. Actually, there was, on the last PvP, there was a couple here from Edinburgh, Matt and Gabby. Hello, Matt and Gabby. And Matt had this excellent plan that he would propose to Gabby at the end of PvP because they would have this amazing experience and, it would be awesome. And they fell out towards the end.
Oh, my goodness.
Because, they rode together all the way. And actually, they, at the end, and they decided to ride separately. Because, it's a long time being with the same person. So ride with different people because you can tell them the same life stories over and over again. If you ride with the same people, you run out of the stories.
That's a good tip. So maybe we could do the event together, but we don't ride together and we just talk about our experiences at the end when we're overtired.
So my husband, Tom, he also supports all my rides and he's actually probably more enthusiastic about my rides than I am initially. And he doesn't cycle at all. So, I do it on my own. But this way I do it with different people. So we never get, we don't have this stage that I'm, angry at each other because you have more patience for people you don't know, I find. You forgive them a bit more because you don't know all their things that annoy you a bit too much when you are tired. But, if you ride with the same person all the time because you're a couple, you kind of run out of things to talk about probably. But, when you ride with other people, like you can, retell the same stories over and over again to a new person. So back to Matt and Gabby, they did get engaged a week later. They came back to Scotland, things were back to normal. And yes, they did get engaged, but not at the end. So sometimes probably it's not the best idea to do those long rides with people you love and care about.
Whoa, that's a good relationship keeper advice. Keep your relationship together, ride separately. Can I ask then, Izabela, I can understand how you train for Audaxes with your commute. I think that's awesome. And I've understood your mental strategy on how to get there. And I can understand now how you've ticked on some big distances there. What about the Trans-Alba race? Now, I mean, I know it's called a race. And in my research, you did say you did the Trans-Alba and you did it like an Audax. But I want to know what made you want to sign up for that anyway. And I guess even before that, what is it for people that have never heard of it before and what does it involve?
So Trans-Alba is, I suppose, similar to like lots of the ultra distance races. So the transcontinental, trans-American. So they were like, oh, trans, we'll use this. And Alba, which is Scotland in Gaelic language. It's a big event around Scotland. So it's 1,000 miles, which is 1,600 kilometers. And quite a lot of climbing. So I think you said in the introduction is 20,000 meters climbing. So it's quite hilly. They will take you through if there is a hilly way between 2 points, they will take you the hilly way. It's a mandatory route, so you can't really, skip those bits. And it's created by Chris Grinnan and Jack Driver. So Chris Grinnan, he completed Trans-American race quite a few years ago. And he thought it would be nice to have an ultra endurance race here in Scotland. And they did the last, I think it was about 5 years ago when they did the first edition. It was 2019. So just as I did my first 300k ride. And someone on our Edinburgh Bike Forum posted the link to the tracker. So I started following the riders and it was quite fun. So it was like, it's the only race I really follow that much. And it's part of it's like, we know quite a lot of the roads. Like we know, this is just Scotland. So roughly where they are. So it's easier to relate to. And it's so far, it happened always like first week of July. So the weather has been always terrible. It's just wet and windy because July in Scotland is usually not very nice. Yeah, so I followed this, and then there was COVID. So there was a break. And then 2 years ago, I was also following the race. And one of the first person who was finishing, Graham Spiller, he was going to finish it roughly when I would be cycling through my work. So I thought I would just go to South Queensberry, which was the finishing point, on my way home, and I will greet the first finisher. So I went there, and so there were the two organizers, Graham's wife, and we waited for him as he rolled in, and so we cheered. He had 5-6 people at the finish line to greet him, and they said, "Oh yeah, you should do it next year." I was like, "Oh yeah, maybe." And yeah, they in the end decided to do last year's edition. Like they only decided, I think, this in March. And Transalba is in July, so it was quite a short time. But I felt like, I could give it a go, do a big tour of Scotland again. But I felt like, oh, do it now on my own. They also take really nice photos along the way. So I thought, oh, we have some cool photos.
Motivation, I love it.
Yeah, and as you said, I did plan it as an Audax. So it's very similar to what I did for the permanent event a few years ago. So I was just planning to ride about 300 kilometers a day and planned it this way. And yeah, ended up finishing third. Well, actually, I met another Audaxer, Andrew Foxton, and we ended up stopping at the same places, initially leapfrogging each other. And then I shared my knowledge about where we can get food, because I think he wasn't that prepared. And, once you get to the north of Scotland, there aren't many places. So it's like, this place will have lunch. Then this is the last shop for the day. We need to stock up here. So we are stopping the same places.
The spreadsheet you put together.
Exactly. Well, it really helps. We rode like side by side because, it's a race. So like we weren't drafting. But maybe we rode maybe 100 kilometers together, but otherwise we're just riding our own pace, which was quite similar. But we are only like quite a few minutes apart. But, I would tell him, like, there is a place there, and we'll just stop there, have some food, or stay for the night. And we finished almost together as well. Like towards the end, he was faster than me, but he decided, no, I said, I will wait for you. So we, seconds apart, we rolled to the finish line, and we kind of, we had the discussion earlier. So how are we going to do it? So he said, like, I'll go first and you will wait a few meters behind me and you roll. And it's like, okay, we'll do that. So, it was a race, but we rode it as an Audax, really. Not together, but kind of together.
Yeah, there was sort of like someone around that was going through the same sort of thing that you were going through nearby, and that sort of helps a lot as well.
Yeah.
I imagine, like just mentally knowing there's someone on the road a little bit ahead or a little bit behind me that's going through this part of Scotland at the same time.
Yes, exactly.
It sounds like he needed your intel more than you needed him, though. I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just more thinking like your spreadsheet with all this shop is open, this shop's not open, this is where we need to resupply and stuff. Did how you go in Transalba come as a surprise, or was it sort of course, this is how it was going to play out?
No, I thought that would be like, I would be last, somewhere at the end. But so, yeah, suddenly when Andrew and I were like, second and third, I was like, oh, I didn't expect that to happen. So then we kind of kept an eye on the person behind us to make sure they don't overtake us. So sometimes like, okay, we need to leave now.
So that was potentially a point of difference with maybe what you would have done if this was like an Audax.
Yes.
You wouldn't be looking and thinking, oh, I need to beat this person. You wouldn't be thinking of any of that type of mentality at all. Did you enjoy that aspect? Did you enjoy sort of feeling a different type of push to a different sense of urgency with the way you were riding?
Actually, I did. I didn't think I would, or I didn't think I would be competitive. But, when actually I was like, oh, I can be third. It's like, whoa, I will have a shorter stop, to push further, because I couldn't go faster. I was just too tired to go any faster. But, in Audax, in all of those things, like you lose so much time by stopping. So by reducing the stop times, that's how you can gain the distance and the time. And to be honest, also, because this was the first event that had a tracker like all the time, So actually knowing that people are watching me, that's quite exciting.
It's really helpful. Personally, for me, when I did it, it was a real mental boost. And I had like friends send random messages at all hours. And it was such a mental boost knowing someone's actually caring about how I'm going here and someone thinks that I can keep going maybe when in my mind I'm really tired and I don't want to anymore. Did you find that as well?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, I know it's like I shouldn't care about it, but I found it like really, really helpful. So my husband, Tom, they had this email chain with some friends and they were commenting what was going on, who was where, what people were doing. So I got some of the emails that I read along the way. And I sent some updates as well. And also we then found that Dot Watcher had a commentary about us. So when we found it, I think on the final night, and we were reading this and was just laughing. So actually that's where the commuting enthusiast comes from, because the commentator, Louis, he used this. I'm like, oh, I'm a commuting enthusiast. Okay. That's how it's stuck. Now I'm a commuting enthusiast.
I love it. Do you think then, Izabela, that perhaps you might be keen to sign up for a different ultra distance cycling event or a race? Like, are you thinking that?
I don't know. So, people ask, oh, would you do the TCR? But the transcontinental race, but the rules, they're so strict, and then, we are the hardest race in the world. Like, it just sounds, I don't know, doesn't resonate with me.
There are ones that aren't necessarily like that might. Like, do you ever look for those? I understand what you mean. There's events where you look at and there's like, the way that the rules are made and what they are and what they involve are very set. But there are definitely now ultra distance cycle events which are looking at being much more inclusive, which, the focus isn't on whoever sleeps the least or things like that as well. Like, would you be more tempted with that type of style or?
So to be honest, like after also going to, doing the PBP, I felt like, Scotland is nice, but other places are also nice. Maybe it would be interesting to ride somewhere else. But to be honest, I haven't looked into races to enter. I don't really plan that far ahead. Most of those things, I make the decision like months before or so that I will sign up for a few things because I don't want to miss out. I don't want to then think, oh, I wish I had signed up for it. So that was the case with the LEL and then the PvP. And I ended up doing them and really enjoyed them. But yeah, I don't know about the races.
Watch this space. I feel like it might be an itch that you are going to scratch, though. So I'm definitely going to watch this space. I'll only find out like the day before, obviously, because it's last minute. So from that journey, something you've recently been a part of, Izabela, is Towpath Talks, which is, in a way similar to here, sharing stories about people having bike adventures, but it's done in Edinburgh, Towpath Cafe, I believe.
Yes.
Bike Tracks in Edinburgh. It's a bike store with a cafe.
Yeah, so there is a bike store called Bike Tracks, and the space that they're using now used to be a nightclub. So it's got 2 stories. So they set up a cafe at the higher level. As of recently, they started organizing talks. So for January, they invited Chris and Mark, who did the TCR last year, and they finished this as a second pair. And they also invited Matt, who did the Paris Best Prize on a fixed geared bike. And they thought, oh, it'd be nice to have those people to share their stories about those events. And they were looking for someone to host it. And Mackenzie, who works at Bike Tracks, and actually the person who introduced me to your podcasts.
Oh, hi, Mackenzie.
So Mackenzie sent me the link, like, listen to this podcast. And so that's how I started listening to your podcasts. And so he asked me whether I would like to host it. And because I followed Chris and Mark doing their TCR, and also I knew Matt from the Audaxes and the PvP, I was like, yeah, sure. So we had the first event in January, and it was really good. Yeah, the stories from the TCR were really amazing. And then that's how we also found out about Matt and Gabby falling out on the PvP, not getting engaged in France, but, then back in Scotland, and really enjoyed doing this. And because in Edinburgh, it doesn't really have that much of a cycling community. There is quite a lot of people cycling, doing various things, but doing Audax is like, I don't know, you spend time on the road on your own for a long, long time, but there wasn't really a place where you could meet other cyclists. So we started doing this as a series and inviting various people from Edinburgh doing cycling things. So we have also people doing some racing. So then we had the February talk and the March talk. And now we'll have also an upcoming one in April, which will have the people who started the Ride to the Sun, Gary and Fraser, and one of the Audaxers, John Pavlin. So I really enjoy working on this because, I get to meet more people. I get to learn about them, certain aspects of, of cycling that I don't know anything about. So for instance, 24-hour mountain bike racing, I didn't really know what that was, but we had guest Naomi in February. So, I got to find out about this and what it's like. It's a little bit different, to like long distance cycling, but similar in many ways as well. And we started also because people were asking about online version of those talks. So we started recording them and releasing as a podcast. So it's not like a podcast, but it's a talk that's been recorded. So it's a little bit different, but hopefully also useful.
I think it's awesome. And I definitely encourage people, if I've got listeners in Edinburgh and Scotland, or even, close by, close enough to maybe go there, I definitely encourage you to seek it out. If you're into these type of topics, for sure, I think it would be fantastic. And you would get to meet Izabela in face to face, which is pretty cool. I will definitely post up links to Towpath Talks.
Towpath Talks, yes. Towpath, because we are at the end of the canal, which is the Union Canal, which links the Edinburgh and Falkirk, and the towpath is the path that runs along the canal. That's why it's called towpath. Because it used to be for towing, it used to have the canal was used for horses transporting goods from one side to the other, so they were towing things, and that's why it's towpath.
Well, I will definitely provide links to the talks in the show notes so that you can actually seek it out. And as Izabela said, even if you can't be there in person, you can definitely listen to them online. And I did that before this episode and quite enjoyed the discussions there. And like you said, it's almost like with this podcast, I've been exposed to different facets of our sport, different types of adventures. I've learnt so much about different countries through the experiences of other people. I love every single avenue of people sharing their experiences and stories because it provides that spark of curiosity sometimes for us to think, oh, maybe that's an adventure I'd like to go on. I've no doubt, Izabela, people are going to hear your story, listening to you talk about, long distance events and Audaxes, whether it's a big event or a permanent or something like that, and they're probably going to be intrigued enough to give it a go as well. So I think it's brilliant, and there needs to be more of this. And if we can make this community grow even more, I'm all for it. Izabela, a question which I've been recently asking guests of the show has been to tell me about one day of their trip. Now, often this is to a guest who has done, multi-day, potentially multi-year trips all around the world. But I feel with Audax, you're covering such a long distance too that sometimes one day of your trip, it's such a monumental part of that experience too. So I want to ask you this question, and I'm going to give you the freedom to choose which day and which event this has fallen from. But please, can you take me and my listeners to one day of your trip?
Right. So I think it will be my second day on Transalba. So, as you said, it's a long day. So I think I started at 6 a.m. from Livingston, where actually I work. So I work in Livingston. So previous day, I've done, over 300, probably 20 kilometers and end up where I work. And then set up at 6 a.m. and going through Scotland's Central Belt, which is not very nice. It's the area between Edinburgh and Glasgow. And it's quite industrial, lots of towns and villages. It's not very scenic and quite tedious, to be honest. And lots of little roads with steep gradients, up and down, up and down, up and down. And because the organizers want to keep you off the big roads, they just send you on all these little roads. And it was really, really tiring. And we went to Callander, which is quite nice. You go north, but then you have to come back south down to Glasgow Way, which is, again, busy with traffic. And then, again, small roads and steep gradient here and there. It was just like really slow going, really, really tiring. But at the end of it, towards the evening, we had to catch a ferry to Dunoon. And there was such a big change from, a day of just being in a quite busy area and tedious roads. Suddenly taking the ferry always feels quite exciting because it's like you go to somewhere completely different. And we could see this storm and rain coming over the hills over there. It's like, well, it's going to be wet. And yeah, in the evening, just got off there. It started raining, but it was beautiful. Like, it was like quite a low fog and clouds, and you're looking up the glen. It just looked all really, really nice. Suddenly we're on big roads. So because there are not that many roads to choose from, so they send us on A roads, which are quite big. So I knew it should be quicker. And yeah, I enjoyed the cycle through the night. I went all the way to Oban, like finished there at 2 a.m. But so it was heavy rain, but I really enjoyed like the night part of the cycle because the rain kept me awake, which was good. And yeah, it was beautiful. Like, so it's in July. So it was all very, very green. I think that was my favorite part of Transalba, just cycling through those kind of peninsula type part of Scotland. It was in the evening, so the roads were very quiet and yeah, just rain, beautiful views. And actually, I enjoyed being actually a bit faster than the first part of the day. Yeah, Scotland is beautiful. I can, even when it rains, it is beautiful.
I love that. And I wonder if that's a little bit unexpected. Like, if you'd said at the start, oh, your best moment's going to be in the pouring rain on the busy A roads, I wonder if you would have believed that.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
It has me intrigued. I'm going to, when this podcast recording finishes, I'm going to look at a map at Scotland and have a look at the area that you were riding through on this day. Just close my eyes and imagine what it would have been like for you. Izabela, if people want to follow along with your future adventures, see where your last minute planning takes you and what rides you're going to go on, how can they follow you and find out more? Where do you live on social media and stuff?
Yes, I've got an Instagram account. It's called Izabela.Murtagh, so my name and my surname, and that's where most of my cycling trips are and my commuting updates. If you want to see the same pictures the pictures of the same places, but in different weather.
You definitely want to see this, people. I will be providing links to Izabela's Instagram profile in the show notes, but I have had the pleasure of trawling through all of your commuting pictures, and they're great. They take me to the scene. Yes, that often involves maybe some not much of the nicest weather, but again, the landscapes you're going through, they look pretty awesome. One day, if I can find myself in Scotland with a bike, I must ride a commute with you. Maybe you need to bring me a lint ball though, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a very pretty route, so that's why I enjoy it so much.
All right, Izabela, I really need to wrap up the show. So I finished with the same 3 questions. You listen to the show, so you probably know what they are. First one is, if you had to pick a song to be the soundtrack to your rides, what song will you choose? Which bit of music gives you the inspiration that helps you turn those pedals round and round and round on these big long rides that you do?
Yes, so actually that's the song that was stuck in my head on my first ride to Carlisle and back. So I'm not very good remembering any lyrics or much of the songs because I'm a classical musician. I used to be a classical musician, so I do know that. But my husband started introducing me to pop music, which is actually quite catchy, as it turns out. So the song is XTC. It's all I know is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Senses working overtime. So that's the song, and that's the song. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is all I had stuck in my head through the first ride, and it got me through. So yeah, I would pick that song.
Hang on. I don't even know if I know this song, and I'm half scared to play it because it's going to get stuck in my head. So hang on. XTC is the band, yes. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Senses working overtime. That's the title.
I will definitely have to give that a play. And Izabela, you now get to have that lovely song that accompanied you, whether you liked it or not. Those lyrics, they have been added to the Seek Travel Ride playlist. It is available now on Apple and Spotify, and that playlist consists of one song chosen by every guest of Seek Travel Ride, and it's a song that means so much to them and is their theme to their adventures. If you're going on a long adventure and you want a whole different type of songs that maybe you wouldn't listen to, an eclectic mix, seek it out. Seek Travel Ride music playlist. I've got a link in the show notes available there on Spotify and Apple as well. Okay, I feel I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you obviously anyway. Izabela, one day you have the choice where you can ride your bike perpetually up a constant climb, no downhill, no freewheel, no top, no nothing, just constantly up, or you can ride into a constant headwind. Which one are you going to choose?
Well, my question to you is, what's the gradient of that hill and how strong is the wind? Is it gusty or not? So is the gradient 2 or 6 or 10 or 15%? And how strong is the wind?
I love this. I love this. And maybe this is the angle that I need to mix this up, because everyone chooses hill over headwind, or about 90% of people. And maybe this is what I need to do to qualify it. And I'm going to make the hill climb, I'm going to say it's a steady 7%. So it's not the steepest thing you've ever climbed, but if you had to climb 7% all day, it would be disgusting. And I'm going to say the headwind, it's not gusty, but it is front headwind, and it means that you can't be in the big ring.
All right. I think I told you sometimes I was thinking about this question, was cycling up the hill and into the headwind. It's like, well, which one is worse? Like, well, I have both. Why not both?
Someone has said to me, I think you need to change it up and say, well, what about you could cycle in the rain? But no, you have to choose hill climb or headwind, because I know you would choose the rain. You love the rain. Come on now.
Well, yeah, I think I will, as everyone else, probably I will pick the hill. But I had the headwind all the. I accept headwinds. They just happen. It's Scotland. They happen. But I think that the problem is, like, it doesn't have to be there. Like, the hill will be always there. The headwind, it may or may not be there. But for us, it's most of the time it's there. Yeah, I will choose the hill.
It's almost like the headwind has cheated you out of something that should be a bit easier, and it's harder because it's there, so it's nasty. Whereas the hill, you're going uphill. I'll allow the hill to give you views, though. It might never end, but you might be going uphill all the time. And imagine what the Scottish landscape looks like if Balachnabar, if it just went on forever. All right, final question, Izabela. You have a choice one day. You're only going to be riding for 4 hours, and you get to choose whether you want to ride 4 hours on your own or 4 hours with other people. Which one are you going to choose?
Yeah, I ride on my own most of the time, and I really enjoy it. I can relax a little bit more. Sometimes when you have other people, you kind of, it's like, you have to, keep up with them, or they have to keep up with you. You have to arrange your pit stops and all of this. So I think I can relax more and just do all my own thing when I'm cycling on my own.
I like that you know yourself enough, and that is definitely an element I can resonate with. When you are on your own, it's less complicated. It's just you make the decisions. You don't have to rely on someone else, and you're not at their speed or at their whim of mechanicals or something like that either. So I do like that. Well, Izabela Murtagh, it has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you and learn more about Audax, learn about what this commuting enthusiast has learnt from all this experience. 8 years commuting, 50 kilometres a day, 300 kilometres a week, learning that 300 kilometres a week is all you need to do to train for London, Edinburgh, London, or Paris, Brest, Paris, coming third place in Transalba. And to also learn an insight into you that some of your best days on the bike have been in the pouring rain. I love that as well. It has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I'm going to see whether this song from XTC, whether the lyrics drive me mental now. But thank you so much for sharing your stories and experiences on the show here for listeners of Seek Travel Ride.
Well, thanks so much. I really enjoyed it. And I really, really like all your podcasts. So thanks very much for having me.
That was such an awesome chat that I had there with Izabela. I loved learning about how commuting became a thing for her, and especially how, when she committed to buying a better bike, how she figured, well, I need to ride for at least 2.5 months to pay this thing off. And then it seemed to be that milestone just grew and grew in terms of, well, of course I'm going to commute. And when she got a car, she continued to commute. And I feel that attitude sort of continued on with the Audaxes that she did. Turning up for an event, having never ridden more than 100 kilometres, to then all of a sudden saying, I'm going to ride 320, to discovering the world of Audax, discovering multi-day events, riding things like LEL and Paris, Brest, Paris, and the Transalba. I sort of have an inkling that Izabela will be taking on ultra races in the future, and I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye out on her account to see whether my hunch is correct. Now, if you've been enjoying Seek Travel Ride, definitely sign up to the Seek Travel Ride newsletter. It comes out every month and gives you a little bit more information about what's coming up on the show, a little bit of detail about a sneak peek at guests that we will be featuring, as well as Listener Corner, where you get to see if your bit of feedback about the show has made it into the newsletter. You'll also find out more about how to get involved in the community and perhaps how you could appear on an episode of the podcast yourself. To sign up to the newsletter, just hit the link in the podcast show notes and you'll receive it to your inbox every month. Until the next episode, my name's Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.